Alright, let's take a quick look at how to move and transform our objects. I have a logo here in front of me. Now I know I've done a little bit of this already in previous tutorials, but let's take a look at it and cover it in a little bit of depth. First of all, to move an object, it is simply done. We grab our selection tool, which is our most common selection tool. Remember, the quick key function for it is V. So I'm going to go ahead and hit V. I now have it selected. I can click on my object, and then if I click and hold and drag, I now can move my object across the screen. But let's say I need to move my object in straight lines. How would you do that? Illustrator has a tool to help us with that, and for those that you that have used Photoshop, it is the same thing. So again, let's click, and let's hold Shift down this time. And as we drag, notice how Illustrator will keep our object in a straight line. Also, the Shift key will allow you to drag in 45-degree angles. Watch as I do this. You can see how it goes into a 45-degree angle. If I go down this way, 45-degree angle, up, 45-degree angle. That's another option. I don't use the 45-degree angle one too much, but constantly I'm using the straight line. So again, to pull your objects or move them in straight lines or in 45-degree angles, you hold the Shift key down as you drag your object. Now let's take another look at how to move our objects. Let's use the arrow keys on our keyboard. This is easily done. Simply, if you want to move your objects right and left or up and down, just use the appropriate key on your keyboard. So let's try that a little bit. And as you can see, it's going in tiny little increments. But let's say I wanted to move in bigger increments, in increments of 10. This is easily done. Again, we'll hold the Shift key down, and we will use our arrow keys again. And as you can see, we are now moving our object in increments of 10. So again, let's see that. I'm now not holding the Shift key, and it's going one increment at a time. I'm going to hold Shift down. You can see how it goes in the increments of 10. That's very, very handy. Now let's take a look at how to transform our objects. How do we make things bigger? How do we make things smaller? How do we reflect, rotate, shear, scale? It's very easily done. Just by clicking on an object, you automatically pull up these anchor points that you have the ability to drag out your object. Now as I've pulled on that, look how I'm distorting the logo. I don't want that. That's not the logo. I need to increase it proportionally. This is easily done, again, by holding the Shift key down and pulling out. I am now resizing my object proportionally. So that is very handy. Again, if we want to make it smaller, holding the Shift key down, we've now made it smaller and maintained proportions. That is a very important quick key function. Now let's take a look at how to rotate something. If you click on an object, again, we have these points here that we were scaling before, but let's say I want to rotate it. As you can see, if I hover just outside of that square, it's giving me this arced arrow. With this arrow, I can now begin to rotate my object. Now if I want to rotate in increments of 45-degree angles, I can hold the Shift key down, and as you can see, it's only allowing me to go in 45-degree angles. If I release the Shift key, I can go in any increments that I wish. So that comes in handy quite often. Now let's take a look at one other cool thing to go along with the scale. Is, let's say that we want to pull everything out from the inside. As I pull here, I'm holding Shift again. I'm pulling from that edge. I'm pulling everything out to the right, but let's say I want to pull all four corners at once. This is a quick key function that's very helpful and I use a lot. If you hold the Option key down, and I'm going to hold the Shift key down to maintain proportions, so I'm holding Option and Shift down, I'm going to pull all four corners at once, and I'm maintaining proportions because I'm holding the Shift key down. Now if I released the shift key, it starts to pull from all four corners, but I'm starting to lose all my proportions, so that's not good. Alrighty, so now let's take a look at a few different options that we have. Once you've clicked on an object, if we right click on it, we can pull up, oh, it deselected it, there we go. We can pull up some additional transform options. What we have here is we have a move option, where you can put in specific directions of where you would like it to go. I don't use this very often, but if it's something that's handy for you, go ahead and try it out. I'm not going to cover it much because, to be honest with you, I don't think I've ever used it. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. I'm going to right click again on my object, go down to transform. We have a rotate option, which allows you to rotate in a particular angle if you want. Again, I don't think I've ever used this. I usually just rotate how we talked about earlier. But if that's something that intrigues you, go ahead and give it a shot. Okay, let's right click again, go to transform. Reflect. This is one I use a lot. So, we pull up the reflect. As you can see, it's already done a reflection vertically, and you can preview it by clicking on and off this box. That's in many of these options on these dialog boxes. So if you want to see what you've done to your image, you have that preview option. That's very handy. But this allows you to reflect your object either vertically, horizontally, or you can put in an angle. I use this an awful lot. It's very, very friendly. So it's easier than trying to flip something manually. So play around with this option. It's very easily used once you find something that you like. So I want to reflect this horizontally. I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. Now my logo has flipped horizontally. Now that doesn't really make a lot of sense with this logo, but that's how you do it. And lastly, we have a scale option, which allows you to put in increments of how you want to scale something down. If you want it to go down 50% or whatever. I haven't used this one a lot, but it can come in handy if you're trying to scale something in increments of 25%. This would come in handy. You could take the first object that's at 100%, do the next one at 75, next one at 50, the next one at 25, and then they would slowly get smaller by increments of 25%. So that can be very helpful. Lastly, under the transform option, we have this shear. Again, I don't use this very often, but you're more than welcome to play with it. What this does is it kind of skews it from the top and the bottom. Let me just show you a little bit of what this does. You can see it's kind of giving it as I go negative, it's pulling it the other way. So it's pulling the two opposite corners from one another. You can also do a vertical option. Let me grab up here and let's see what the vertical does. You can see that it's shearing from two different points there. So it can come in handy. There's also a shear tool and a rotate tool, and there's some other tools on the toolbar, but I like to right click on the objects. You're more than welcome to come over here on the side. If you click over on these tools, you have the rotate tool, you have a reflect tool. Right below it we have the scale tool, shear tool, and reshape tool. I've never really used those, but if that's something that's quicker for you than right clicking on the object, go ahead and play with those. But in a nutshell, that's how you can transform and move your objects. The quick key functions here that I've mentioned with the shift key and the option key are extremely useful. So if you're taking notes, write that down and use it frequently.